Okay. The EM algorithm, we'll try to go through a version of it if we have time. Again, we are looking mostly for the ideas behind the mathematical concepts, not necessarily the computation, because I think for a lot of these things, especially like backpropagation and EM, there's not a lot we can test you on from a calculation example. Yes, you will have the revision videos. They'll be released probably on Wednesday. I need to record them for you because there's basically the videos for just the pre-part of the lecture, which is for ethics, and then the post part will be the revision. So I will get those out for you by Wednesday, hopefully. So you will have enough time to look through those. Okay. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. All right. So keep on putting your doubts or concerns and brickbats and criticisms on. Ask me anything. I do appreciate that. Okay, but let's go through some of the work on dimensionality reduction in class for that. So it's either that you have a linear or a log loss for adding an additional coefficient. Okay, so that's the idea behind these. Okay. All right. So we're done with this part. So I'm going to stop for a second and check to what you do. Okay. Okay, why do we want the highest variance? Okay, the reason why we want the highest variance is because we want to capture as much as possible in the data set, right? So if you go back to the slides, okay, at the beginning, okay, let's see, can I get back? Okay, I'm still on annotation, that's why it's not working very well. Okay, so if you look at this one here, right, we can see the axis of the highest variance is over here, right? Because the points are most spread apart on this pink diagonal, okay? So it expresses the data with the most amount of variation. By capturing that, meaning saving that into the representation, we're going to lose the minimal amount of data when we keep that information. If we keep a different dimension, we'll still lose data, but it won't have as much effect as choosing another one. Okay, so this is why we always want to choose whichever dimension has the highest amount of leftover variance for this. This is similar to the idea of information gain, right? In decision trees, we choose the feature that has the most information gain, contains the most entropy. You can think about when we are choosing orthonormal basis for PCA or SVD, is doing the same idea, right? We want to capture as much of the qualities of the data set as possible. So we're looking for a dimension that captures the most entropy, captures the most variation about the data points. Okay, so that hopefully answers that question that you had. Okay. Will you need to do the PCA math? No, you won't have to, okay? The important point is, I think, for a lot of the things in machine learning, the machines ultimately can do it much better than we can. So it's actually much more important that we know the application of PCA, know why you can use it and what are its shortcomings, right? So again, we saw in some parts of the math that doing PCA can be very expensive, especially when you need to compute the entire covariance matrix. Okay, so when you have a large data set with many features, PCA as normally described is not very feasible. Okay, you have to do I think order cubic operation to do to recover all of the components. Okay, instead we want to use SVD, which allows us to compute these iteratively, right? Okay. So what does the x minus x bar mean? This is just the amount of difference between the position of the point as well as the mean. Okay, and then VKT is just the representation of the vectors in the transpose, right? So the VK is just the the particular orthonormal vector, right? So if you remember what we showed before, so let's say we have our data set here, right? All these points over here, and we saw that we could decompose the x1 and x2 to v1 and v2, okay? Then our v's are just basically this particular item here, right? So each row in the V matrix is the coefficients of expressing that particular basis in the original vector space of x1, x2, okay? So originally we were in x1 and x2, but when we translate it, we see that a V dimension is basically some units in x1 and some units in x2. So this information is then captured into each vector. Okay? So how do we go from line 3 to line 4 and line 4 to line 5? Okay, let's take a look. That was page 15. Okay, line 3 here to line 4. Okay, let's take a look. What are we doing? We're, okay, we already transposed. Okay, we already transposed these two guys, right? And what we are doing is just rewriting this into what we are trying to look at. Okay, so we have the two bases for our projection, right? Which we had from before, and we're just encoding the cost in here. Okay, this is just the same thing as what we had written before, which is this is just the cost between the data point and the center, just expressed as a product, right? These are just dot products between each other. Okay, all right. And then when we go from, so this is from 3 to 4. Sorry, what happened to my, okay. Let's see, what happened to my pen? I think my pen is dead. Let's see whether I can charge it a little bit. Okay, well, I'm gonna try to do it with, okay. All right, so to get from the other line, okay, pointer arrow, no. Okay, then the next part we're going to do is just basically compress this right into the covariance matrix. So this is just saying that what we can use from this, right, this difference between each part of the dimensions, we can compress that and represent that as the covariance matrix between the different axes. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. So let's take a look at the next part. Still can't get this thing to the, oh, no, it's still working. Okay, hold on a second. Clear. Okay. We're not going to cover kernels of PCA. I think that is something really interesting that we can do is use a kernel function for PCA. So that has to deal with a little bit about the choice of the representation of distance between a point and its mean, right? So as we said, we can use LP, any LP norm. In the lecture, we're using the simplest form that we commonly understand, which is Euclidean distance, right? A squared distance between 2 points. But you can use actually any type of function you'd like. You don't necessarily have to subscribe to using Euclidean distance, okay? So if you know a little bit about kernels, which is the same as what we use for things like what? Support vector machines. Okay, so again, in support vector machines as well as PCA, there is this idea in many machine learning algorithms, but in the two that we've seen in lecture, is the idea between 2 points. Okay, 2 points in the data set. Okay, so anytime we have to measure distances between 2 points, we have a lot of freedom into what type of measure we can choose. Okay, we can use L1 distance, which is just counting distances with respect to each dimension separately, right? Like Manhattan distance. Okay, we can use L2 Euclidean distance, but you can choose anything that you'd like. Okay, so there are different means of doing so. So one that you may have come across, especially if you executed a project and you use support vector machines, is radial basis function. So here, the idea is that points that are very close together have a lot of similarity, but as we go farther and farther apart, they become, the distance between them matters less. Okay, so that is the idea, right? So you can think of it. Let's see. I don't know whether. Well, yeah, my iPad is stuck. I can't seem to annotate well. Let's see. Annotation. Okay, well, I'm not sure what happened to it. Okay, well, I'll leave it for now. Yeah, I can't write. Okay, maybe I'll try to come back into the meeting using this one. Give me a second here. Sorry about that. Join. Okay, I'll wait for that to come up. Oh, it came in already. Okay. Okay, yay, I'm back to annotating. Good. So that's the idea about having kernels. Okay, the idea that a kernel is basically, again, distinct from what we have learned from deep learning, right? In deep learning, a kernel is basically a convolutional kernel, right? But here we're talking about kernels as a way of measuring distance. Okay, basically a different way of putting in a distance measurement that you can plug into different engines. Okay, so you can plug it into the engine of PCA, you can plug it into the engine of SVM. There are a number of other places you can put them in to create algorithms that behave slightly differently. Okay, so the radial basis function, or RBF, that you may have heard of, okay, is basically representing things by thinking of distances as something like a normally distributed. Okay, so if you have a point here, let's say x, and another point here, x1, we'll say these are fairly similar to each other because they're close in the distribution. But if I have a point here, x2, and a point here, x3, we're going to say these are, again, distant, but not too far away from each other, even though x3 is a lot farther away. It's just, for all intents and purposes, far enough away that they don't have a lot of influence to x. Okay, so these are just different ways that we could measure the idea of a distance function. Okay, let's see. Go back to the mouse and hope that I can control this. Okay. So zj means a point of value zj on the plane v. Yes, that's correct. Okay, so basically we're looking for the projection of that data point onto the remaining dimensions that we have that we're left with after doing the projection. So if we're doing a projection of a 2D point onto a 1D line, that's exactly right. Okay, but in general, you can say I have a high dimensional space of size n, and I'm going to use only k dimensions to express it, so some subspace, right? Then the points have to live on this smaller subspace manifold, right? They have to be characterized by only those k dimensions, and then our zj would mean times v would mean a point on that manifold, okay, with some residual that we lost, right? So some information lost by all of the dimensions from k plus 1 to n, which we just discarded. Okay, great. Okay, do we have any more? Okay, so let's spend a little bit of time going through the second deck and see how far we can get with that. Okay. Thanks for all of your questions. I really do appreciate it. I hope it's helpful for you to go through the lecture with me. Okay, let me go back and then pick up the other deck. Give me a second here.